Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by Air Patrol North. Visit airpatrolnorth.ca. Our special guest today, Jeff Marek. He is one of the most astute and sharpest analysts in the game of hockey today. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our special guest today hails from Stouffville, Ontario. He is a former host of Live Audio Wrestling. He is co-host of The Bill Waters Show. He was co-host of The Bill Waters Show. He was host of Leafs Lunch, host of Hockey Night in Canada Radio, Hockey Night in Canada Insider. He is today. He is co-host of 32 Thoughts, the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Marek. Okay, I got to ask you where the gentleman came from.
Okay. That's okay. Okay, we'll start there. By the way, just as a quick aside, okay, I appreciate it. I appreciate the billboard. It looks really good. But I just watched your interview with Jana Hefford, and like Hefford's resume is like enormous. And I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, so what's Joe going to say about me that even come close to what Heff has? So thanks for giving it the college try. So gentleman comes from Gentleman Jim Corbett. So,
yes.
I mean, you're a boxing guy, so you know. So this would have been
I know of him, yes.
Yeah, so this would have been like 1995 when I was doing a show on The Fan when it was over at Holly Street in downtown Toronto with George Strombolopoulos and Bob Mackwitz. And Spider Jones was there, and I'm going to talk a lot probably today, Joe, with you about Spider Jones at some point. But somehow Spider, because obviously with the boxing background, he started calling me Gentleman Jeff out of nowhere. It's like, Spider, where is that coming from? And then he started to go on about, we always talk about the history of boxing, Chuck and I, Spider.
Yeah.
And he talked to me a lot about Jim Corbett. He said, that nickname's going to stick with you, son. And it did for about, 5 or 6, maybe 7 years. And you've brought it back here in 2023. Gentleman Jeff. So that's where that one came. Strombo started calling me that after a while too. But that all goes back to Spider Jones over at 40 Holly Street.
Yeah, Jim Corbett, I believe he beat Jack Dempsey back in the day and held the world heavyweight title for a bit of a time. Yeah. I think he's probably born in about 1895, about 100 years before he got the nickname. But that's okay. So that's the nickname. And so when you're talking about maybe the greatest offensive player outside of Wayne Gretzky, which is why we had Jana Hefford's resume was a little bit longer than yours, but that's okay. You got a tough act to follow, but that's okay. Yours is slightly different.
I'm here to fake the funk on your audience.
Yeah.
Jana Hefford, Hall of Famer. She's done all these things, and here's a guy whose nickname's Gentleman. Marek.
Marek, you're great. I love you. Anyway, I want to talk about your start in the broadcasting business.
Sure.
How did you get into it? What made you decide that maybe this is something that you would enjoy and you'd be good at? Accidental.
Completely accidental, Joe. Yeah, I came into this thing backwards. I was going to the University of Guelph, studying English and philosophy, trying to educate myself out of a job. As I look back on it now, I was trying to read so much and write so much and study so much that I'd be completely unemployable. So I did a degree in English with a minor in philosophy, and decided to take I was going to University of Guelph and decided to take a year off. I did my BA. And I'm going to take a year off, and I'll go back and pursue masters, maybe chase the PhD somewhere down the road and walk the groves of academe and be a professor and conference hop and grade papers and all these types of things. And I took a summer job at the Fan. Then it was the Fan 1430, turned into the Fan 590 some years later, and it was in promotions. The promotions department, which is essentially, you round up as many, summer kids available to hand out, promotional material on the street. And this would have been, I want to say, Joe, probably like 94. This would have when Bob McCowan would have hosted the morning show.
Yeah.
And they had a promotion called the Big Ticket. And this was a big one to sort of, announce Bob McCowan as the morning show host and everything around the morning show, drive traffic to the morning show. Sports, as you know, sports radio has always had a hard time getting traffic around mornings. It's more of an afternoon drive phenomenon for a
Right.
number of different reasons. Sports radio has always performed poorly in the morning, generally because sports people, by the time when they wake up, they already know what happened last night. They don't need to know. They need stuff to get them on with their day. But afternoon drive always does well. Anyway, long-winded. So McCallum was the morning show. There was a promotion called the Big Ticket, which essentially involved me handing out, and our entire promotions group, including George Strombolopoulos, who I'm going to get to in a couple of seconds, handing out was called the Big Ticket. And these are individual tickets that were handed out. I think it was like a Mr. Sub or one of the sub chains. And anyhow, it was everyone has their own ticket. And if Bob McCallum calls your ticket, you win Leafs tickets or Jays tickets or whatever promotional item. And that got me started. That got my foot in the door. And then within a year, I was doing an overnight show from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. with Strombo and Makowitz. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take another year off. And just like I was getting paid by that point, meager pittance, but I was getting paid. And every year that went on, Joe, I just kept saying to myself, you know what? I'll go back to university next year. I'll go back the following year. I'm going to go do my master, but somewhere along the way, I stopped saying I was going to go back. And somehow, here I am, this very accidental career. I have no plan for this, Joe. I never did.
So the sports coat with the patches on the sleeve is still in the closet somewhere.
Oh man, yeah, I know. I always wanted that look, right? You walk in. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be reading from Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Yeah, that's somewhere deep buried in the closet, Joe.
Okay, so
Can you
you're
imagine,
gonna
how pretentious would I have been? Like, I would have annoyed myself. I was bad enough as a student. Imagine me as a professor. Good Lord.
Would you have had the pipe? You think you'd have the pipe too, or what?
Yeah, but it would have been blowing bubbles. I would have been
Okay.
yeah.
So you mentioned you're going to say something about Strombolopoulos. Tell us more about.
Well, I mean that's how I met George, and George is one of my, along with Bob Makowitz, one of my great friends. Who, and I always say this to people who started in the industry, who, kids, when you've done the same thing, talk to various media colleges. George's story is not one of just being in the right place at the right time, and he just emerged on Much Music and started this career. Like, George started at The Fan, and Strombo put his hand up for every single shift. It was a board op shift with Norm Rumack. George would do it. If it was a call screener shift for Spider Jones show, fan 590. What's your name? What's your name? What's your question for Spider? Like, he put his hand up for all of it. Like, he did every single job. Like, he made himself so valuable at that station. That was his foot in the door. Like, on the weekends where he would work nonstop, like Friday night, Saturday, all day, Sunday, all day into Monday, when the morning show was coming in, he was leaving to go home. He would sleep out in the reception area on the couch. Like, he would stay at the station and sleep there and get up for his shifts. And it didn't matter what it was. He put his hand up for everything. And I always look at George and I've always said, like, for him, like, that is a career that was earned the hard way. Like, there was no elevator to success for George. Like, he took the stairs every single step of the way. To me, he is the great example of someone. Now, you might say he did it the old school way, but that's fine. Like, he earned everything that he has. He has a tremendous career, a tremendous life, and he earned it. And he did it the hard way by putting his hand up for every single. And that's how he got the promotions job. And that's how I met him. Like, every single thing. Go hand out stuff on the street. Okay, I'll do it. He was the okay, I'll do it guy. I mean, you've met people like that too. They have to have talent, of course, along the way. But Strombo was, in a lot of ways, the guy that did it by rolling up his sleeves and saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes. It doesn't matter. He was in Kelowna as an FM rock station mascot, FM Lizard.
Yeah.
There are pictures somewhere of him as in the lizard outfit, but that was just because it was available, and he put his hand up and he said, I'll do it. That's the Strombo story.
Yeah, he had a special love for the business, didn't he? And he pursued
Big
that
time.
all the way. And like a lot of us do, we have that love for the business. And the key is to always to say yes. We had Anthony Corelli, WWE star from a few not long ago, Canadian guy, and he said that he learned early, always say yes. He talked about a guy who had an opportunity to be a big star in WWE, and they asked him if he could ride a motorcycle, and he said no. So Anthony said, whatever they said, yeah. Can you speak Italian? Yeah. Can you do this? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's how you
It,
do it. You just keep saying yes.
you're so right. Just say yes and then figure it. Even if you don't know how to do it, just say it and then figure it out after. Like, oh
Right.
man, what have I got myself into? And then you just figure it out. Like
Yeah.
you got to completely park your ego. And the only, you know this, Joe, like the only way you're going to grow is if you put yourself in uncomfortable situations where, you know, you're forced to grow and you're forced to change. That's what Strombo always did. And I would submit that's what the majority of successful people have done.
Right. My first job, well, my second job, my first job as a full-time sports guy was in Lethbridge, and they asked me if I could edit, and I said, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." Never edited
So
in my life,
hang
but
on.
yeah.
So that would have been in the era too, because you know, it was the same for me. That was like reels and razor blades and chalk and tape and piecing everything together. So like what turned into like 20 seconds on your sportscast took about what 4 hours to edit together because it was
Yeah,
just splicing tape together.
splicing tape. Yeah, different
Oh
times for
man,
sure.
sure was.
So, okay, let's talk about your move into wrestling with live
Sure,
audio wrestling. Tell us
that was
how did
fun.
that gig
That was
come about?
fun.
How'd you get
So
from the
I
fan to there?
I I was working part-time at TSN's Off the Record with Michael Landsberg, and I was doing a number of wrestling. Like whenever you have wrestling guests on, I'd be the one
Yeah.
that would, you know, help write the questions and help put them together. But that sort of dovetailed into when I got fired from the fan. And remind me to tell you the story
Oh,
because
okay.
I think you're listening. I think everyone loves a good firing story, and I'm really proud of this one. I'm very proud to tell you my first fan firing story. There might be another one coming up soon. We'll see.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So so anyway, so I took a job at an internet startup called Virtually Canadian. It was Canada's first internet only radio station. This would have been, geez, Joe, 1996 or 1997. So the idea of online broadcasting, this is just like the baby steps, right? This is root before the fruit. And somehow Shelley Klink was involved. You remember her from 640 and Barometer with Bill Carroll.
Yeah.
Shelley Klink was there. John Walters owned it. There was some beer money behind it that sort of seeded it and got it going, but they needed programming. And because I had done all these wrestling shows with Landsberg at Off the Record, I got to know a lot of the wrestlers and always kept in touch with them. And we ended up starting a wrestling radio show. Donnie Abreu was part of it. Chris Tidwell was part of that as well. They were the real OGs to all of it. And the idea was like the format was simple. If you're, you know, if you're going to talk to a wrestler, don't talk to that wrestler as the character, talk to that wrestler as the person. You know, like you wouldn't talk to an actor about a character that he or she played. You talk to them as a human being. Like you wouldn't, if you had Tom Cruise on, you wouldn't talk to Tom Cruise as if he was really Jerry Maguire. You would talk to him as if he's Tom Cruise. It just seems that, but somehow for wrestling we park that, right? We want to pretend like the character that they play is
Right.
somehow different.
Right.
So it was considered a sort of shoot show, and you just sort of, you know, you talk to wrestlers, and mind you, some of them didn't want to drop the act or break what was called kayfabe and drop the character at all. But you know,
Sure.
that was a nice run. That was a fun run. I made a lot of friends. Some that I still keep in contact to this day. I was just texting with Lance Storm the other day. I still keep in some contact with people like Chris Jericho. A lot of people in the industry, CM Punk and I still text all the time. So I unfortunately, a lot of the people that I did know are no longer with us. I mean, it's an industry that has a body count. It's an industry that has a very awful track record. And I'll be honest with you, like I still like I just finished reading Andre the Giant's book, the Pat LaPrade book, which is outstanding, maybe the best
Mm.
wrestling book I've ever read. Like I still am fascinated by the industry and read a lot of sort of books about wrestlers from my era. I don't get a chance to really watch a whole lot now because I just don't have the time to do it. But I'll tell you, like, and maybe you feel the same way about boxing, which is I know a big part of your background. I have this conflict when it comes to MMA. I even have this conflict when it comes to hockey and hockey fights or football. I'm still conflicted about
Hmm.
professional wrestling. knowing, what it's done to people, what it's done to families, what the costs are for all these athletes. And yes, I understand everybody goes into it eyes open wide, and this is a choice, and we're all grown-ups, and these are all decisions. But I'm still conflicted about, and it's not going away the older I get. As a matter of fact, Joe, the older I get, the more profound it gets. I'm still conflicted about why I enjoy this, knowing what it does to people, and, knowing that there's, broken bones and broken lives and broken families that trail a lot of these guys. So
Yeah.
I'm still in my head. I don't know where you're at with like boxing, but
Yeah.
I'm still there in my head, and I don't know that I'll ever let go of it, or I'll ever resolve it or sit comfortably with it. Maybe is a better way to put it.
Right. Yeah. It's rooted for me in that, deep down from being from a kid when I first fell in love with the sport and
Mhm.
really admired people like Muhammad Ali and then Sugar Ray Leonard and and those guys were my heroes and I wanted to be
Yeah.
just like them in some ways and so of course LA suffered greatly as a result of staying around the
Yeah.
game too long. But yeah, so it is I do have compassion for those who suffer as a result of their complications as a result of fighting, like George Chuvalo. I mean, George
Yeah.
had a long run, pretty good run, and still had his
Sure did.
his intellect, and he was still in good capacity until really recently, as it turns out. But that's going to happen. It happens to a lot of people in a lot of different sports, but certainly boxing is one of them. So,
Yeah.
you during your gig at Live at Law, you made a number
Yeah.
of appearances off the record, a show you used to work for,
Yeah.
and we actually have
Yeah.
a clip with you when Sable was on the
No!
show as well. Let's roll that, Vic, shall we?
No
As
way!
far as what's too far for WWF,
Look
there's
at that
different WWF
baby!
products you have to consider. Monday Night Raw is an adult show, right? Sunday Night Heat is geared towards a younger audience, and they also have other television shows that are geared towards younger audiences, just like cartoons. There are cartoons for adults, there are cartoons for children. There's wrestling for adults, there's wrestling for children. And this is, I think, where a lot of people kind of get funky and they say, well, this is wrestling, so it's supposed to be for kids. Well, you know what? It's not. It's mainly for adults now.
And I think that's where responsible parenting comes in, and you have to make that decision for your family whether it's right for them to watch or not. And a lot of parents don't agree with it, and they don't have to let their children watch it.
So, do you still
Wow.
follow it all? What do you
Just a
think of that kid you see
baby.
there? Yeah, yeah,
Wow, I see a young kid who's nervous as hell. I see a young kid who's got a ton of questions. I see a kid that's got his whole future sitting in front of him, and he doesn't know which way to turn and which road to go down and which avenue to pursue. I do remember being that kid. Oh, Joe, you take me. Where did you find that?
our librarian Paul Pascu,
Wow.
he's got incredible video
I love Paul.
library. Yeah,
Paul
Paul's
is
awesome.
a
Yeah,
Paul to me is the greatest hockey researcher in the business, bar none, hands down, full stop.
yeah,
Great job, Paul, getting me on the spot on that one. I remember that one. So that was Sable sitting with Carl DeMarco, who was then the president of WWF Canada, now WWE. Carl was originally the business manager and agent for Bret Hart. That's how he got into the industry, and that was Sable kind of making a point about parents don't have to let kids watch, but as we all know, kids aren't babysat 24/7, and that property at that time was aired at a
yeah.
time where a lot of kids do watch. That would have been like 1998, probably, where that clip would have been from. So that was in that rise of the WWF Attitude Era, which was like the tried and true formula. When everything else fails, just use sex and violence, to try
Uh,
to beef up and sell your product, and that's essentially what the WWF did at that time. But wow, look at that child! Look at that child in that black V-neck with that horrible haircut and that goofy smile. Ah, bless you, Joe Tilley,
yeah,
for getting Paul Patsku to put. Look at that kid. Look at him. He's barely old
yeah.
enough to pee straight. Did I even have to shave at that point in my life?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What a
That was
child.
great.
Yeah.
So you go from that child, as you mentioned, to
Yeah.
a co-host of Leaf Lunch on MoJo,
Yeah.
and tell us about how
Yeah.
that transpired.
Well, okay, so that was I want to get back to my firing story. Remind me to tell you
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
firing story.
Well,
I
no,
think
go
you
there
like
now. Go there now. Just go there now. Let's
well,
go there now.
it is a big part of the story because everybody in the industry is going to have their first firing.
Yeah.
You're way more talented than I have ever been or ever will be. So probably you never got fired before, but I've been fired a few times. And the first time I got fired was at the Fan, would have been 1995, I want to say. And this is when, and Nelson loves when I tell this story. So when Nelson Millman was the program director. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying Nelson and I are great friends. Nelson and I went on to have a marvelous relationship, and that really is a lesson in the industry I'll get to in a couple of seconds. But I was doing the overnight show with Strombolopoulos and Makowitz, and Nelson took over as the program director of the station. And one of the first things he did was he fired me and Makowitz. Hated the show, didn't see any future for me and Bob, I guess. And he's like, I'm getting rid of these two guys. But Strombolopoulos, on the other hand, he's going to do basketball with us. He's going to work with Barry Davis on the Hoops show, all of it. We're keeping Strombo. So at that point, I was working as my summer job. I was working at a cemetery, a park lawn, where Harold Ballard is buried, Conn Smythe is buried there
Okay.
too. And I get a call from Strombolopoulos like 4:30, 5 o'clock when I get home from work. And he says, "Have you talked to Nelson today?" And I said, "No, why would I talk to Nelson?" He said, "Well, you got fired." And I said, "I got fired?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how do you know that I got fired? And I don't even know that I got fired." He said, "You'll love this one, Joe." He put a note up about it on the fridge. So, like, in the cafeteria at 40 Holly, where the Fan radio station was, there was a firing notice for Ian Makowitz.
I hereby
George
notify.
Yeah, exactly. Effective immediately, the services of Jeff Marek and Bob Makowitz are no longer needed. We wish them best in their future endeavors. George Strombolopoulos remains. Blah 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 blah. So to this day, he never actually never picked up the phone or told me. My card didn't work anymore, so I guess I was legitimately fired.
Yeah,
But yes,
it was real.
my
Yeah,
first firing story happened on the fridge. I
yeah.
love telling that story because Nelson and he ended up hiring me back, and I ended up walking out on him right before the fall ratings, which is a huge no-no to go to 640. So, he fired me and then I walked out on him. And so in my mind, we're even. We're
Right.
even, Nelson, but we went on to
Yeah.
become great friends. He became a great, not only confidant, but mentor in a lot of ways for me. He's someone that I could always lean on for advice much later on. So a lesson for younger broadcasters getting in, even if someone fires you, even if someone fires you on the fridge and humiliates you in front of an entire staff, don't hold grudges. Don't
Let it
hold
go. Yeah.
grudges. Let
I'm
it go. It's part of the business.
yeah, I'm going to guess um, your former boss, Melman,
Nelson Millman?
Melman, yeah,
Yeah.
learned better firing practices as time went on. The
That wouldn't
fridge
fly
wasn't
now.
always.
Well,
Always
this
check
is
the fridge before you
this
go, guys. Always check the fridge
yeah.
before you walk out of the building.
Am I still employed? Well, you better check the fridge. Now there's very sophisticated HR departments, the way things go. But no, back then, let's put a note up on the fridge. That wasn't
Yeah,
that long ago, Joe. That's like 96,
yeah,
bud. Like, that wasn't that long ago. Just
right.
tacking a note up
Yeah,
on the fridge saying, "Yeah, Marek, here's your hat. What's your hurry?" Leafs lunch was fun. I was over at 640. I was working in the sports department, and uh, the chorus had just got the Maple Leafs radio rights, and they wanted a support property for it. John Shannon at that point was running Leafs TV and thought it would be a good idea to have a hockey simulcast, noon hour simulcast hockey show, which was simulcast on Leafs TV. So it'd be mainly on MoJo Radio AM 640, and then
yeah.
simulcast on Leafs TV. Would give them 2 hours of live programming. We had just hired Bill Waters at 640, and this thing seemed hand to glove. And that was my honestly, that was my first real entry point in a lot of ways into covering hockey. Bill, who I adore and respect and give a lot of praise and thanks to, like, he introduced me to everybody, agents, managers, like everybody in and around the game. That's where I met Paul Patsku when I was doing Leafs lunch. It would have been, I remember during the 2004, here's a story for you. During the 2004-2005 lockout, and I used to talk to Paul a ton back then. I really should more now because I learn a lot when I talk to Paul. Paul, like a lot of us, was, bored. There's no hockey. What are you going to do? And he ended up spending a lot of time at the Hockey Hall of Fame Research Center. And him and I always had this thing about, we always wanted to do like a hockey Mythbusters show, like all the lies that we've been told about hockey, all the myths that have existed about hockey. It'd be fun to do like a Mythbusters show. So one day we got talking about Gordie Howe and the Gordie Howe hat trick. And Paul, we were like, I wonder how many he actually had. And so Paul, because he's Paul, actually pulled all the game sheets, whether he played with the Red Wings or the Arrows or the Whalers, like WHA teams, and went and found out that I believe it was only 22 fights in the entire career and only 2 actual Gordie Howe hat tricks. And if you trace it even more back, the Gordie Howe hat trick should actually be called the Harry Cameron hat trick because he was the first to actually achieve that. That was in 1917 playing with Toronto. So really it should be called the Harry Cameron hat trick. And anyway, so that sort of became a sort of jump off point for, well, what else were we lied to along the way? Like, what are all these stories? But I met Paul through Bill Waters, and I met a lot of people around the 1972 series, like Aggie Kuklovich. I got to meet, who was the interpreter, who I'm sure you met before he passed numerous times.
Air Canada,
and Air, that's right, Air Canada, and that's how he became. He became sort of an interpreter for the Summit Series with Alan Nicholson and Bill Waters, who was a big part of it. But that was my first entry point into hockey and meeting all these people and starting to understand how the whole industry sort of fit together, from teams to managers to NHL executives to agents to everything above and below and sideways and beyond. So still keep in touch with Bill. Just turned 80 not too long ago. Happy belated birthday, Bill Waters. I'll tell you what, and you've met a lot of these guys too, and a lot of them are no longer with us. Nobody talks about sports that way anymore. Like the Dick Beddoes of the world are gone. The sort of hard-boiled sportsmen, kind of gone now. Bill's sort of like one of the last ones who sort of still uses that kind of, vernacular, pass the, get off the table, Mabel, the $5 is for the beer. Like that kind of stuff, like that, no one talks like that anymore, Jim.
Right. Well,
But,
we actually
Bill's one of the last.
Okay, so we have a clip from you and Bill. This is funny enough.
Oh,
This is around during the lockout time, and they're talking. They're in negotiations for the salary cap, and this is what you boys had to say at the time. Roll that, Vic.
What can we read into the fact that for the second day in a row, neither Mr. Goodenow nor Mr. Bettman are present?
Nothing.
You don't think, and I heard you talking with Oakley this morning, you don't think this could be a red herring smokescreen? Hey, look over here, and Bob and Gary are doing the deal over there?
Nope, they are not. I just know they're not. I can't divulge my sources. I know they're not. Mm-hmm. So the fact remains that a good friend of mine, Agent Cordani, said to me that, this is like going on a shopping trip. Going out to pick up the groceries, you're bringing them back to Bob and Gary to see if they like them. Mm-hmm. And if they don't like them, you go out shopping again. But the only problem is you don't have time to shop and there's nowhere to shop. This is a one-stop shop, these 2 meetings. And the most important outcome of all of this, Jeff, is whether or not they have a third. And the third has got to be by Sunday, Monday at the very latest. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of things contingent upon somebody's going to have to sing a different tune this afternoon.
Wow.
So there you go. You talk about that vernacular. We're full of it there. Who is Agent Cordani?
I'm glad you asked. He never told me, but here's my thought on it. I think it was Darren Dreger. I think it was Darren Dreger because TSN and working at Agent Court.
Right.
And Dregs had worked with Bill at Sportsnet previous to going over to TSN. So and he had Bill had nicknames for everybody, right? He used to always call me Jeffy. That was a big one for him for whatever reason. But I always thought that Agent Court, and I should ask him that. Agent Court Annie was Darren Dreger. But Bill was great. First of all, it's interesting seeing that board there and seeing, Pierre LeBrun, Canadian Press, as well, and seeing everybody's background. There's a few things there. The actual deal itself, for the salary cap. Interestingly enough, the first real thaw and the first sort of concession to all of it, ironically enough, was done on Valentine's Day in 2005. That would have been in, of all places, the honeymoon capital of the world, Niagara Falls, between Ted Saskin and Bill Daly, which I don't, the irony of which has never been lost. But that was a really interesting time. That was lockout. So we had a 2-hour hockey show to fill, Joe. So you have no NHL going on. How are you filling a 2-hour hockey show? So we did this. This might have been the most fun, and I think honestly, I really do believe it. This is what put that show on the map. So we did every week. We would do a special on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Tuesdays, we would have a guest from the WHA on. So it didn't matter whether it was, Billy Butters from the Minnesota Fighting Saints, or Bernie Perron's going to talk to us about the Miami Screaming Eagles. Someone from the Leapaloo Nistico is going to talk to us about the Toros, or John Garrett's going to talk to us about the Cowboys. We'd have someone on to talk about great stories from the WHA, and that those are many. And those were great laughs. There was like the second hour of the show, and it was just hockey stories from the WHA. Ed Willis's Rebel League, by the way, for anyone's interested, probably the best book ever on the WHA. And then Thursdays, we would always have a guest on from the movie Slapshot. So we never got Michael Ontkeen, and we never got Paul Newman, but I think we pretty much had everybody else, including Nancy Dowd, who wrote the movie. Now, her brother, as you all know, Ned Dowd, who played Oglethorpe, was a producer for Last of the Mohicans. So he was in the movie, and a lot of the dialogue and the script for the movie comes from him essentially playing minor league hockey and having a tape recorder in the dressing room and just recording the conversations. And that became the basis of what is considered one of the more gritty, close to the truth, fictionalized mockumentaries about the sport of hockey. She told me something fascinating. I was talking to her off the air, and we were talking about the Paul Newman character, Reg Dunlop. And she said, there's one actor who called me relentlessly, who read the script and wanted the part. She said in her mind, all she could see was Newman. And I think George Roy Hill probably would have had final say over all of it. But Nancy said that there was one actor who called over and over and over. It was like relentless. I have to have this part. I'm this guy. I'm this character. I'm Reggie Dunlop. And just close your eyes for a second, Joe, and everyone watching and listening right now. Imagine that Reg Dunlop is not Paul Newman, but Reg Dunlop is Al Pacino. She said that Al Pacino called relentlessly and wanted that part. I cannot for a second imagine Al Pacino playing Reg Dunlop.
No.
Paul Newman is just brilliant in all of it. But anyway, to the clip there from the old Leafs Lunch radio show, man, that was a lot of fun. And in a lot of ways, although it was a challenge because we weren't talking about anything that was actually happening in hockey, and how lockout talk goes over with audiences, talking about the WHA grand old stories, and great stories from the movie Slapshot as well. Like the guy who played Hanrahan, he later went on to become the voice of Chester the Cheetah from the Cheetos commercials. Made a fortune, an absolute fortune. Like Slapshot is littered with these like little nuggets, these little Easter eggs of what happened after and where all these people, actors and hockey players, ended up. So it was a fascinating time, and I really loved doing those shows. Loved it.
Sure. The Hanson brothers have had a pretty good run. It's interesting, Pacino of all people, right? And I don't know if you've seen that. Did you see that movie that was made about the making of the movie The Godfather?
I have
It's
not.
fantastic.
It's
fantastic. It really is. Yeah, the producer was a Canadian guy, by the way. And it was all about him and how he put the movie together, and how Scorsese really wanted Pacino. And this producer's boss just said, no, it can't be Pacino. Pacino's too small. He's too, he's not tough enough. He's not Michael. He's not Michael. And Scorsese, says he's Michael. And the author of the book, what's his name?
Mario Puzo.
Mary Puzo said, yes, it's Pacino. Yes. And so they really wanted Pacino, and how they went about getting Pacino in sort of a backhanded kind of way. And it was awesome. Anyway, it's a good movie. I highly recommend it.
I see. I
Yeah,
love the I love the making of documentary. Like I loved Apocalypse Now. I
yeah,
just watched it
right,
again last year, and
yeah,
if you've seen the movie Hearts of Darkness, the making of Apocalypse Now, like I put Apocalypse Now like up like as far as like best movies of all time, like way up near the top. And that
yeah,
documentary is right there. The making of it is
yeah.
just, especially listen, anytime you can go behind the scenes with Dennis Hopper, I mean, you're
Oh
gonna
yeah,
you're going fishing
yeah,
where there's a lot of fish. But yeah, Heart of Darkness is right up there with the actual. So anything sort of behind the scenes, like I love the movie Network, and there's a great book about the making of Network, the great Patty Chayefsky movie, which many consider, certainly in
yeah,
our industry, Joe, consider
yeah,
the greatest movie ever made because of the obvious navel gazing that goes on as we're all fascinated with what we do in broadcasting and network news in the 70s. But I'm in a lot of ways almost more interested in the making of than the actual product itself, which might be
yeah.
more of a comment on me than anything else. But how it gets there in a lot of ways sometimes is more interesting than the actual thing that gets put to market. So no surprise
Right.
about the
Yeah.
Godfather documentary.
So it's actually it's an actual movie, and it's sort of it's based on the truth, facts that happened, and it's an awesome movie. But it's the mob involvement and everything else. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here, but it's a fantastic movie, and I highly recommend it. Okay, let's come
Love it.
back to Jeff Merrick's career and on
Oh,
from
that's boring. Let's
CBC.
talk about no. Let's go. God, let's go more on the Godfather and Apocalypse. I got the fun stuff, all the good things.
Well, let's talk about the CBC, the transition from
Sure.
MoJo to
Yeah.
Leafs TV to CBC.
So, like anything in my goofy career, it's all about timing and luck. Like really, again, like there's no grand strategy, there's no grand plan. Like, wow, Marek, look how you went from A to B to C to D. It was all accidental, and a lot of it was luck. And this was, the brainchild of Scott Moore and Joel Darling. So Scott is, running CBC Sports. Joel Darling, longtime executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. They strike up a relationship with Sirius Satellite Radio, and they want to finally. I always wondered why it took CBC so long to do this, considering it was sitting there forever. And I always think that it's because CBC looks at sports, or always used to look at sports in one very specific way, which is let's not worry about the sports. We're here to do serious news and drama, etc., and documentaries. I can never figure out why they never did anything with the Hockey Night in Canada brand outside of the actual show itself. So they had a relationship with Sirius, and they wanted to create Hockey Night in Canada Radio, which was essentially a 2-hour hockey talk show broadcast on Sirius that just that's helped support the Hockey Night in Canada television show. And so I got a call randomly from Scott Moore, who I'd have on the Leafs Lunch show every now and then to talk about industry issues and what's happening with Hockey Night in Canada. Called me and said, I want you to come to have breakfast with me at Dunn's on King Street. I'm like, okay. And Scott Moore invites you somewhere, like you go. So I showed up, and I remember walking in the restaurant, and Scott wasn't there at the point, but Joel Darling sitting at the table. And first of all, I was a huge fan of the Buffalo Sabres in the 70s, and still to this day, and this is no offense to Rick Jeanneret, but when I think of the Buffalo Sabres, Ted Darling is the voice. Ted Darling to me will always be the voice of the Buffalo Sabres, and I have tremendous respect for the Darling family, starting with Father Ted and Joel, who later went on to be my exec and still is one of my execs at Sportsnet to this day. And I remember thinking, like, holy smokes, like that's like Joel Darling. These people are like gods to me. Like, wow,
Yeah.
that's Joel Darling. Like, that's the Darling family. Holy smokes. And then Scott sat down and said, like, do we need to sign an NDA, or can we speak confidentially? And I'm like, speak freely. And laid out what they want to do at Sirius Radio. And here's where I'm going to tie this back into my firing. So he said, we had a wonderful meeting, talked about, what a show could look like, my involvement in it, as a host, would I be interested? And they said, like, okay, look, we have to interview a couple of more people. We're going to get back to you. I think like a week later, they officially offered me the job. And I don't think that Waters was thrilled that I was leaving. We mended the fences afterwards, and we're all fine now. But years later, you know what Scott Moore told me? And this goes back to my firing story.
Yeah.
Moore told me that, they were on the fence about who to hire for the job. And he said, you have a champion out there that you know nothing about. I said, what do you mean? He said, you know who sold me on you? I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Nelson Millman." He said,
Wow.
"Nelson Millman went to bat for me and said, like, we've been battling against this guy because it was a fan versus the Leafs Lunch show, which was the only sports show on 640. He said, you want to make the right choice? Take him. Because A, he's already doing it. He loves hockey. He loves Hockey Night in Canada. He's the right choice for you." So that same guy, again, lesson to the industry, the same guy that fired me on the fridge,
Uh-huh.
was the guy that recommended me for the job and got my foot in the door at CBC with Hockey Night in Canada. Thanks,
Yeah,
Nelson.
don't burn your bridges. Don't burn your
Don't burn your
bridges,
bridge.
baby.
Don't,
Yeah,
don't.
if they leave your name on the fridge, you let it go. Just let it go.
That's going to be the big takeaway from this one, eh? Yeah, we're going to talk to a guy who got fired on the fridge. Tune in. Great Canadian sports show.
Well, you're going from the fridge to the fridge, okay? So here, from the fridge to the fridge, and
That's good
okay, so
transition. That's
you
good.
you guys are making so you guys are making the big changes over at Hockey Night in Canada, and
Yeah.
Tara Sloan is having you on. I think at the time she's working out in Calgary, I believe, maybe to talk about the
Yeah.
changes. Let's watch that, shall we? Vic?
You know, they're calling this a dream team, but this actually was a dream of yours when you and George worked together 20 years ago. Tell us about that.
Yeah, at the Fan 590. Funny you call it a dream team. I'm sitting on the stage yesterday, and there's Strombo to my right and Ron and Don to my left, and I'm thinking to myself, I must be in a dream. Otherwise, I should be like serving drinks to these guys or bringing around hors d'oeuvres or something like that. What am I doing here? But yeah, Tara, we started in radio together 20 years ago at the Fan 590 in Toronto, sports radio station.
Wow, look at that shot.
George, for many that don't know, has a really strong sports, specifically hockey, background, and we were like the low men on the totem pole. Okay, we're in the promotions department. You know, the guys that are out on the street handing out promotional items and tickets and essentially trying to psychologically lure people into listening to the radio station. That was me and George. I was an overnight call screener. George was an overnight board operator. And we used to sit in the producer's room, Tara, and say to ourselves, wouldn't it be great to work in hockey together one day? Wouldn't it be great to work in, oh, I don't know, Hockey Night in Canada together one day? So for everyone who's in college radio right now or studying to be a broadcast journalist, it can be done. It just kind of takes a while to get there.
Wow.
Or taking a break from your master's degree, trying to be a college professor or anything like that. If you're doing any of those things, remember this could happen to you.
When did I get so old? That wasn't that long ago. Man, does this industry ever age? Does this industry ever age? But yeah, I remember that day. Like I was like, I don't belong here. Like we're on the stage of that introduction, and there's Ron McLean and Don Cherry and George and me and Darren Millard, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, how did I end up in this spot? And still, like you go back, like Ron and I are the only two that are still there from that entire group. Darren's doing very well with the Vegas Golden Knights. The Don Cherry story has been well told and documented and discussed. And George is working for Apple and Apple Music now. So it's interesting how quick things change. Like this. Like the one lesson I think through all of this, if you follow anyone's career, sports media specifically exists at two speeds: super slow and super fast. Like there's no in between, right, Joe? Like, am I on the mark about this? Like, is this your history as well? Like, things go super fast or completely slow. And I think that that's why you have to be able to adapt quickly when things happen, and you have to be able, I really think, Joe, like, to endure long stretches where there's just like petty frustration after petty frustration after petty frustration, where nothing seems to be changing. But then when it does, it's sudden and it's lightning quick. That kind of reminded me of that as I think back to that day that we were just talking about there with all of us up on the stage for that introduction. Wow, man, I go old fast. Jeez, did I get old fast?
Right. Well, there's two things that they take away from that. One is, don't quit before the miracle happens, because it could be around the next corner. And the other thing is I worked with Ron McLean in Red Deer, Alberta.
You did,
Okay,
eh?
so we worked for CKRD Radio and TV, and so here we are. Ron was afternoon drive shift on the radio, and he did the weather on TV on the TV station.
Yeah.
And then he'd record a bit for the Late Show. And so what I did is I did radio news from 5 to 10, And then the whole time I'd be writing my sportscast for 11 o'clock at night, 11:30 for the TV station. And I end up getting a job in Lethbridge. And then, but 2 years after that, both Ron and I were in Toronto. Ron working for Hockey Night in Canada and me at CFTO/CTV Toronto. It was pretty, you just don't know how things are going to unfold, do you? Yeah.
You know, hearing you talk and hearing you mention that about, not knowing when the next miracle is going to come. I remember having a conversation with a guy by the name of Jim Rose. This is Jim Rose ran this is during the era of Lollapalooza, mid 90s. Used to run this bizarre circus where, people throw darts in each other's backs and lifted weights from ear, fire and knives and chainsaws, this type of, it would have fit in on a tour with 9 Inch Nails, for example, and they did. So on the old show that I used to do with Strombo and Makowitz, Jim Rose was in town, and I think he just had his first appearance on the X-Files. He was on a few times, and we went out to lunch, and I'll never forget this. Great. It wasn't advice. It was more sort of life perspective in the industry. And I was talking to him, a huge fan, and he said, "So you're just getting started?" And I'm like, "I don't even know if I'm getting started because I don't know if this is going to work for me. I don't know if I'm going to do this as a career." And he said, "Well, just so you know, and it happens to everybody, you're going to face a time, and there's no right answer. You're going to face a time in your career where you're going to have to make a decision. And the decision is this. It's hard because there's no obvious answer. And you only realize if you made the right decision years later." He said, here's a decision. It's going to come a point in your career where you're going to have to decide, do I need to quit or work harder? Again, there's no right decision, but I'll never forget Rose telling me that. He said, you're going to have a time. Should I quit or should I work harder? Now, every single step of the way in my career so far, and it's worked out, my decision has always been work harder. That's always right for everybody. There are some people that have decided to quit and gone on to do other things that are fantastic. But it's just that sort of moment where you realize yeah, you know what? None of this is guaranteed. There's no well, I've worked here for 5 years, so I deserve that. No, it's not the way it works. You can either quit or you can work harder. And I've never forgot, to your point about, the next miracle is around the corner. Let's think about Jim Rose. You're going to quit or are you going to work harder? Everybody faces a decision.
Right. And so many times it just could have been that next thing, right? If you just hung in there just a little bit longer, who knows what's going to happen. So,
right. Come out of the corner. Don't throw in the towel. Come out of the corner. Right, Joe? Just come out of the corner.
Don't put that towel down. Put that towel down. Okay. So Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier in the third fight.
Yeah.
The Thrilla and Manila. Okay. Ali's in the corner saying, I can't go out there. I can't do it. I can't go out there for the final round. I'm just done.
Yeah.
And he just and Angelo Dundee says, "Champ, just get off the stool. Just get off the stool."
It's a great.
He got off the stool, and Joe Frazier did not. Sad. Joe Frazier was saying the same thing. Hey,
yeah.
If it's the other way around, if Joe says, Joe's corner says, "Joe, just get off the stool," then we have a different story there, don't we? So
see, listen,
that's
I'm like you, Joe, and this is why I was always a huge fan of yours because you talked and you told a lot of these stories, and I learned a lot of these boxing stories from you. And boxing to me has always been I grew up even to this day. I'll tell you, every now and then I need when I'll see a boring boxing match, I'll need a cleanse and I'll go watch Hagler and Hearns from Vegas. I'll just go watch the three. I was oh, okay, I'm feeling better about boxing now. But it took me a long time to sort of realize about boxing and what my attraction was to it. And a lot of it was presented by you and listening to you talk about it and tell the stories. I think what's attractive about it is boxing is a sport that exists without metaphors. There's nothing that you say you want to do in boxing that you don't actually want to do. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And that's exactly what you mean. You've heard teams, oh yeah, we're going to kill him. Oh, you're not going to kill him. You're just going to beat him 5-3. Right. I hope you're going to mercy them or whatever. Boxing has no metaphor. There are no metaphors in the sport. The only metaphors exist around guys and girls like you and me and people that write about the sport And I think this is why that boxing has always been a sport that, as much as they may be conflicted about it internally, and so am I think a lot of intellectuals are both drawn to and repulsed by at the same time. Essentially, what I'm getting to, it's a wonderful sport. It exists without metaphor, and it elicits an immediate reaction. And the reaction before it's intellectual is emotional. And for that reason, it's always been to me one of maybe the most fascinating sport in the world. And I know that for my entire life, I'm not going to reconcile how I feel about what happens because of the sport and my love for it. But I still find myself, attracted to that glow, and I probably always will be.
Yeah, yeah, that's the beautiful sport, right? And it's there's a lot of things that are ugly about it, but it's the beauty of the purity of the sport. Just you and the other guy, and that's it. Or you and the other woman, that's it, and that's
Yeah.
one on one, and it's just it is what it is, right? It's just
I can
yeah,
only, I don't know if you've ever felt like I've always, and I wonder this way about like UFC. And I've asked, like, Sean Pearson's a buddy of mine. He lives just down the street. Our kids play hockey together. I see Sean all the time. And he had 7 fights at welterweight in UFC. He's a good fighter. And what I've always wondered about is like, what happens between your ears when you're a UFC fighter and you hear the door close? What happens when you're a boxer and you hear the first bell ring
Hmm.
and you realize it's me, it's that other person, and there's a referee here to make sure that nobody dies, as macabre as that
Right.
might sound. Like, what happens when the door closes and the bell rings? Sean always like, oh, tough guy, oh, nothing. You don't really think about it. Never thought about that before, Marek. What goes on in your head when I'll never know, Joe. I'll never know.
Oh.
But I do wonder what happens in your head. I really do.
Well, you're thinking about it. I mean, for me, it was always the facing the fears, walking up the stairs, climbing it
Yeah.
through the ring apron, and then you're there. And same thing, UFC, the gate closes, and there it is. 2 of you and the referee, and then immediately it's like it to me, it's like all those nerves, because there are some nerves, no doubt about it, getting in there. But once it starts, it's on, and the nerves are gone,
Yeah.
and it's just a case of now I've got to deal with the business in front of me, and that's what it is. It's kind of like when the red light goes on and you're on the air, and it's time to talk. You just talk.
Yeah.
And
You know,
in the beginning, you are nervous about what you're going to say, but over time, you get more and more used to it, right?
can I take that one step further here? Can I go one little bit further here with you on that one? So for me, I've always been fascinated with a very specific slice in time, which is the moment before the event happens, right? The moment, and you felt this before. Like I remember 86 Hagler and Leonard. Like as they're coming out of the corner to engage, like, oh wow, this is going to be incredible. Just that slice, that one moment before they actually engage, like that slice in time right before an event happens, I've always been fascinated by. Now, I don't know if you have I'll take this to hockey. I don't know if you have a favorite hockey photograph, but for me, it's 1951, Bill Barilko, the puck over Jerry McNeil's shoulder, the
Okay.
great photograph taken
Yeah.
by the great Nat
Yeah.
Turovsky. The Turovsky brothers,
Yeah.
legends in Toronto. And for me, that picture is the best hockey picture ever taken. Because if you'll notice, you can see Barilko's diving. You can see the puck. You can see Rocket Richard with his mouth like, oh, he's like, oh man, like
Yeah.
I know what's coming
Yeah.
here. You see Jerry McNeil going backwards. But if you look in the stands, everybody's still sitting. The puck hasn't gone in yet. Like
Right.
it's that perfect slice right
Yeah.
before the event happens. To me, it is for my liking anyhow, the perfect hockey photograph because it captures that moment, that slice in time
Yeah.
where it's and the anticipation right before the event. Does that resonate with
Yeah.
you at all? Like, am I going?
No,
Do
that's
I
great.
have? Is there
No,
something there?
I
Because I've
for
always
sure.
loved that moment in sports.
Well, for me, I'm getting shivers right now just thinking about that, right? Because that's
There it
it.
is.
There you
Look
go.
at that.
Uh-huh.
Look at the fans.
Look at Vic.
They're all sitting. They're
Not up yet,
all
and it's
sitting. Yeah.
about to go
Look at
crazy in
Rocket.
there, right?
Look at Rocket over on the right.
Yeah. What? Oh, I should have checked that guy. Anyway,
What a beautiful picture.
that is the
What a beautiful
biggest
picture.
goal in Maple Leafs history, no doubt about that. Biggest goal in Maple Leafs
Beautiful.
history. So Stanley Cup winning goal, and it's like Bobby Orr's goal for the Bruins, but it's the biggest goal in Leafs history. That's the most that is the moment in Leafs history. Okay, so before I let you go, I want to talk to you about 32 Thoughts, the podcast, which is one of the, if not the greatest podcasts out there right now. You and Elliott Friedman. Here's a bit that you guys did from the Green Monster at Fenway Park last January.
Okay.
I think Boston could win the Stanley Cup this year. I think the more interesting question is, what are they going to add? Like, do they think that they have to add a big piece? Do they think they have to add a couple of smaller pieces? When the Boston Bruins take a look at trying to win the Stanley Cup this year, which they're going to do, I'm going to be very curious about what they see as it's important for them to do.
You know, last year, at the beginning of the season, when a couple of defensemen were making headlines, John Klingberg and Jacob Chychrun, Boston was one of those teams that did inquire, a lot of teams did, about Jacob Chychrun. We all know they did the Hampus Lindholm deal. He's a huge part, so I don't know that they take a swing for a big defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, like anyone else, like any team that has an elite squad and has aspirations and expectations of going deep, what do we always hear? Depth.
Yeah.
Depth. I don't know that I see Boston taking huge swings here, like Bo Horvat swings. Do you?
You know, to me, if they're doing Horvat, they're doing it because they think they can sign him.
Okay, in retrospect, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, I remember how cold I was. So we had flown. That was a Sunday before the Winter Classic, Penguins and Bruins, and I knew we were going to be doing a podcast that day. I had no idea we were going to be doing it on top of the Green Monster. I had no idea it was going to be that cold. That was deep into the afternoon at that point. Elliott and I were on the I think it was like the 6 a.m. flight. We had done Hockey Night in Canada the night before, and we got there and the sun was out. I'm like, okay, this is nice. It's mild weather, and it just got frigid. And I think you can see in that, like, Elliott's all bundled up. He's got the gloves on. Me, I've barely got a coat on. My hands are shaking. My teeth are knocking together to try to cobble something, some type of sensible comment together. I'll tell you what, man, it was a trip being on top of the Green Monster. That I'd never been on top of the Green Monster before. It exists in legends, certainly in sports. But that's one of the cool perks from doing this podcast is we get to travel around to a lot of cool events. And to be honest with you, that was my first time, Joe, ever at Fenway Park. Like, I've been to Fenway to see a hockey game. I still haven't been to Fenway to see a baseball game. And I'm a huge baseball fan, allegedly. Can you be a true baseball fan, American? I've never gone to Fenway. But that was the first time I'd ever been to Fenway Park. To Fenway was to watch the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Boston Bruins. But the Monster was a trip, and man, was that a cold early, because you can tell, right? Like, the sun is just starting to set at that point too, and we're freezing there. We're chilly there. Elliott's the only one sensible enough to bundle up. That is, I'll tell you what, though, and that's some very kind words that you said about the podcast. And you're a professional broadcaster, and you introduced that, and just as I wrote it for you. So thank you so much for saying all those kind words about thoughts. Podcast, the check is in the mail, Joe Tilley. It's a real treat to do this with Elliott. Can I tell you a story about Elliott? It's one of my favorite stories to tell.
Yes, for sure.
It's not tell you a story.
Yeah.
Elliott is one of the most thoughtful people I've ever met in my life. I know we like to bust on each other all the time, rib each other all the time, but one of my favorite stories, and there are countless stories that are similar to this, of Elliott's compassion and charity, and he understands his place in the sports universe and understands the modicum of celebrity that he has, and he tries to use it for good as much as possible. I'll give you an example. This would have been 2007, I think it was. So this is when Elliott was still at CBC.
was with Hockey Night in Canada, but was also doing the CFL on CBC. This is when the CBC had the CFL rights still. And he was the host. And he was out somewhere. I don't know, might have been a mall or something. And a mother and father came up to him and said, "Hey, are you Elliott Friedman?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "Listen, our son is a huge fan of yours. He's a huge CFL fan, doesn't miss a game. Do you think we could get an autograph for him?" And Elliott said, like, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, certainly. Where is he?" And they said, like, "Well, he's around the corner. He's a little shy. He's pretty embarrassed. He's going through chemotherapy and he doesn't have any hair." And so Elliott says, "Please bring him over. Please bring him over here." So they go and get the kid, and they bring the young man over. And Elliott's, super gracious, signs whatever he wants and talks to him and says, like, "Are you going to watch the game on Saturday?" I don't know, like Hamilton, Calgary, or whatever it was. And the kid says, "Yeah, of course I am. Like, I don't miss a game." He says, "Okay, good, because I'm going to get your parents' phone number and I'm going to call you on Monday. Make sure you don't miss the game." Kid says, "Okay, fine, great, yeah." Before the game, Elliott Friedman shaved his head bald, and then called the kid's parents, said, "Put him on the phone. Put him on the phone." Said, "Don't you ever be embarrassed not to have hair." That's
Wow.
Elliott Friedman. That's Elliott.
It's beautiful.
That's the level of like decent human being. So you get a chance to work with someone like that, as much as we joke on each other and bust on each other and rib each other. That's the quality of human being I get to work with on that podcast. It's my favorite Elliott Friedman story. And trust me, there are countless stories of Elliott's generosity and compassion. That's Elliott.
Yeah. Actually, I remember meeting Elliott many years ago at the Fan when I'd come on to do Shulman's show or whatever, back in the day. And always a great guy, always he's
Smart.
done extremely well.
Smart guy,
he
has
for
like
sure.
he was. It's funny. So I remember when the internet came to the Fan. Like that's how old I am, Joe. Like I remember when like there was one computer. It was in the producer's room, and no one knew how to use it. What is this internet? And there was only one guy at the station. Only one guy. Me and Spider would be sitting there looking like, how do we use this thing? What do we do with this?
Forget about
one
it.
guy who knew how to use it, and that was Elliott. He was the only guy that knew how to like use it for any type of information. We were all like going to like, media guides and various books for information. Elliott actually knew how to use the internet in 95 or 96 or whenever it was, maybe even before that. I can't recall, but yeah, great guy, smart dude. I got all day for free. Just love him.
I was one of those guys who knew this would never last. Don't worry about the internet. It'll never last. So
bad.
It's a bad, crazy fad. Okay. Before I let you go, I know there's a few Leaf fans out there wondering what you're thinking about the off-season acquisitions, where the Leafs are at, and could it possibly be their year?
They can. Like, listen, I know Maple Leafs fans get very uncomfortable when you talk about the Stanley Cup. I understand that, but they are amongst a group of teams that legitimately could win the Stanley Cup. Like, do a lot of things have to break their way? Yes. You have to have some luck along the way? Yes. You have to have good health along the way? Yes. You have to have like an easy 4 or 5 game series along the way to make things easier? Yes. But when you look at this team from top to bottom, it is still a team that is amongst a group that could win the Stanley Cup. Like if you look across, just look across Canada, like there are really only 2 teams you can make the case for. One is in Ontario and the other is in Alberta. I think Toronto and Edmonton are your only case. I think the Calgary, although I want to always throw this in, I think the Calgary is a wild card this year with Ryan Huska behind the bench. Daryl Sutter not there anymore. Jacob Markstrom sort of flops good years and bad years. We'll see how that ends up. But the Maple Leafs legitimately, provided all those things happen, everyone needs all of those things to happen, they have a shot at winning the Stanley Cup. Absolutely. Tampa's taken a step back. We all know about the Boston Bruins losing Bergeron and Krejci to retirement, so they've taken a little step back to the pack. The Florida Panthers are going to be without their 2 top defensemen, Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour, to kick off the season. the door is open for them. Like I know that the Metropolitan has a couple of really elite teams in the Carolina Hurricanes, and you can make the argument the New Jersey Devils now have really arrived, as we saw last season. But even just to get there, you can see the path. Like it's right there. Like it's no longer just like, the Penguins are going to the Stanley Cup final and the Capitals are a force and the Rangers get
Right.
like it's open. And I'm sorry, Maple Leafs fans, but be settled with it. Your team once again has a shot at winning it all. And you wonder, Joe, now that since they've got, the baby grand piano off their back of winning a series last year, you wonder how much that propels them this season. We'll see, but they do very much have a shot. And they're a tougher, nastier. I'm not talking about like Ryan Reeves and fighting, but just like a miserable team to play against. Like Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi, these are miserable guys to play against. Like I know that sort of fighting vanishes in the playoffs and etc. But like they've got guys that you hate playing against in the playoffs. Tyler Bertuzzi was great for Boston last season. Tyler Bertuzzi, before that, last time we saw him, he was playing in the playoffs. Last time he was in the playoffs in the American League with Grand Rapids. He's the best player in the playoffs. Like he was the MVP. Like he was that's where a guy like him shines. Keep everybody healthy. This team has a legitimate shot at going all the way. 100%.
Yep. Guys who you, as a fan, you hate them on other teams, but you love them when they're on your team. You just to love what they bring to the table. Ken Lisbon was like that, right? So, yeah.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Rat.
Yeah, the rat, right. So, I also want to ask you about the PWHL. We had Jana last week, as you mentioned.
She's great.
Are you excited about this?
I am. You know what? I really am. They've been knocking on the door for the longest time. I just hope that through all of this, because this is the first season, and Stan Kasten, and in a lot of ways, this is his sort of ship to steer here. Jana, of course, is a huge piece of it and a huge part of it. But he said, like, look, this is our first season. This is not going to be without mistakes and missteps. But what it's going to do is sort of, I think, lay a foundation for us to finally find out how good these athletes can be. We've never had an era where girls and women were able to be as good a player as they could possibly be, because they couldn't just be hockey players. They have to have hockey was sort of like a pastime, because they had a real job to support themselves, and hockey was sort of secondary. Now, what we're seeing now is the beginning of an investment for girls in the future who are going to take that next step. Like, as great as Jana was, and she was one of the best athletes ever in the sports. Like, for every Jana Hefford, another generation comes along, and it's Marie-Philippe Poulin. And then, the next, Sarah Fillier is going to be, that next generation. How good can she be?
Haley Wickenheiser, slightly before there, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like sitting on the shoulders of those that came before. And now that there's a foundation and a league where athletes are being paid a livable wage, or a wage whereby, hockey can be more than just something you do part-time, we're finally going to be able to see, what the best women hockey players can actually achieve. And regardless of what happens in the first season or the second season or the third season or whatever, I think that if you're a capital H hockey fan, you can't help but be excited about this. Like, if you love the sport, that's what I always say. Even if you're one of these people that has no time for women's hockey, that's fine. But understand that if women's hockey grows, all of hockey grows. You know why, Joe? Because we get more rinks, and the equipment manufacturers do well, and the trainers do well, and the entire industry grows. And you know who benefits? Guys do. Those same guys that say, I have no time for this, this is ridiculous. Their industry grows, and it's more vibrant, and it's more healthy, and there is more money pumped into the hockey ecosystem because of women's hockey. It is the biggest growth segment and the biggest growth section of hockey today. So again, I always submit this, Joe. If you're a fan of capital H hockey, this is a great story for you, because this helps grow the entire industry, and it'll rise every single ship in it. male, female, animal, vegetable, whatever it is. This is a good news story for capital H hockey. So I'm happy for them. I'm thrilled for them.
Yeah, and not to mention the 11 or 12 million people that gather around the television to watch the gold medal game when the women are playing. So,
always great.
There is significant fall. It's great.
No, I'll tell you what. I've always wanted in the era of everything behind the scenes and HBO's, 24/7 Road to the Winter Classic and all of these. I've always thought it would be I've talked this about with countless of the athletes, and they love the idea until it's them that have to be out there wearing it. I always thought it would be fascinating to do one of those behind the scenes, 5-part documentaries where you follow Team Canada and Team USA, but you get to actually hear how they feel about one another. Because I assure you, like whenever they're in front of the microphones and camera, we have a lot of respect for Hilary Knight. We have a lot of respect for Marie-Philippe Poulin. I assure you, the level of animosity and downright hockey hatred is spectacular. And I really think that would, I think it'd be a great documentary to watch. And secondly, I think it would move the women's game forward as well. Because you can see like just how nasty they are against each other and how much like the competition is intense and emotional and to the bone. I've always thought that would be a fascinating behind the scenes documentary look. Team USA versus Team Canada. Follow them both for a year. Hear them talk about themselves and mic them up on the ice. Remember Cassie Campbell told me a story once, about Salt Lake City, 2002 and the gold medal. And at the World Championships previous, when USA beat Canada, Cassie said she was going down Handshake Alley and Canada just lost. And and she's never told me who it is. Damn you, Cassie. One of the players from USA, as she shook Cassie's hand, said, "Cassie, bitches never win." Cat burn. And so Cassie wrote that down and carried it with her and put it in her stall wherever she went. That saying. So that would have been in Salt Lake City as well. Bitches never win. And that was part of her fuel. And I'm thinking, can you imagine having that out there in a hockey documentary about Team Canada women versus Team USA women, but a whole documentary about that? Joe, tell me you wouldn't watch that. Tell me you wouldn't watch that 5-part series.
I'm in.
Come on.
Agreed. It is absolutely brilliant. And you've got a hell of an idea there. I think somebody should follow up on that. No doubt about it. Jeff, that was really awesome having you on.
Thanks, pal.
I laughed. I cried. It was brilliant. Yeah.
Thanks to Paul Patsku, who's Paul Patsku, the first star. Come on, Dion Francier, la première étoile, the first star.
Yeah. Paul Patsku.
La deuxième étoile, the second star, Larry Robinson, la troisième étoile, the third star, Dale Hunter. I always love doing the Montreal Canadian, the Montreal Forum.
The Montreal announcer, yeah.
But Paul
Jeff,
Patsku,
thank you so much. It was great, buddy.
Thanks, pal.
Yeah.
You'll be good.
And Vic is good too. Yeah, Vic is good too. So
great job.
Yeah. Attaboy, Vic. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate this and appreciate you taking this time. Thanks, man.
Enjoy a very difficult time, I'm sure it is in Mexico, where your only big decision is which Bermuda shirt am I going to wear, and do I go with the green bathing suit or the purple one? Enjoy the big decisions in your life, Joe.
Well, making sure I golf early because it gets hot in the afternoon. So that's another thing. Find out early tea time. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.
We'll have more.
You be good, pal.
We'll have more sports when we come back. Thanks.
What our kids breathe matters more than ever. But how can you tell if a school is safe to breathe in? If you could actually see what's in the air, would you keep them home? Introducing Air Patrol, making the invisible visible, ensuring schools are safer for everyone. Breathe safely.
And my Swiss picks of the week. Last week, I picked the two big races on Mohawk's massive card for 2-year-olds, and I picked both winners In the $970,000 Metro Pace, I went with Captain's Quarters, who jumped into the lead at the half. He was challenged late by the favorite. Let's get the call of the finish.
Legendary Hanover on the outside will try and wear him down. Clever Cody is looking for some racing room. Captain Luke is back in fourth. Gem Quality outside fifth. It's Captain's Quarters. Legendary Hanover trying to find more. Clever Cody's got nowhere to go. Captain's Quarters, one final push from Legendary Hanover. Captain's Quarters wins the Metro Pace. Legendary Hanover was second. Clever Cody was third. Captain Luke fourth. 149-3.
Jody Jamieson drove the winner. Captain's Quarters, trained by Herb Holland for owner Rich Stiles. I also picked the exactor, also the Metro winner last year.
Everybody saw him last week. It was in an impossible spot. It was, it wasn't a great drive, and got to shake loose and 25-2. Like, horses just don't do that every day. I knew he had the best horse coming in. I just didn't know how the trip was going to work out, and I definitely didn't see myself removing to the lead. But he did what he's supposed to do. He goes when you ask him. He's an amazing horse.
Jody's pretty obliging. I asked him to come in, and we trained him in sets all the time. And when it come time to race him, we knew he was a nice colt, and the only option was Jody at the time.
A wild race in the Mohawk Million for 2-year-old trotters. TCI, the favorite, had an early break, but managed to get back in it. Tennessee Tom would trot into the lead, but we had a terrific finish. Let's get the call.
Off cover comes Griff. Tennessee Tom. TCI on the far outside is coming on. There's 6, 7 across. TCI digging in though is Tennessee Tom. TCI, Tennessee Tom, TCI. You gotta be kidding me. TCI wins the million. Second was Tennessee Tom. Allegiant was third. 154-3.
Oh, what a race. What a call. David Miller drove the winner, TCI. Beautiful horse coming back from that break, trained and co-owned by Ron Burke. Mickey Burke and Miller commented after the race.
What were your thoughts when you got away at the back of the pack? Did you ever think that he really had a shot turning for home?
No, not at all. Like at the quarter, I was like, wait, we got the Breeders' Crown still. And then, I got him out in the flow, but he was running in so much around the last turn. He really wasn't making up any ground up. But as soon as he got into the straightaway, I said he's going to win.
This colt's so flawless normally that you just don't expect it. And when it happened, you're like, oh no. And it's all you can do. And then you just watch the race and see what happens. And he just put in a phenomenal effort, and fortunately the race set up for somebody coming from behind with his talent that he was able to do it. And I mean, give the colt a lot of credit. He come back and didn't make didn't make anything other than that, and just go forward.
And there you go. We made some money this past week. This week we're staying at Mohawk for Saturday night's 6th race, the $75,000 grassroots final for 3-year-old filly trotters. I like the number 1 horse, Smashing Rackets. Bob McClure drives. I also like the Exactor and Triactor Box 1, 4, and 6. You can get all the latest from Woodbine Thoroughbred and Woodbine Standardbred on Instagram and X. Go to hpibet.com, darkhorsebets.com, and bet365 for your wagering options.
Discover the finest patio experience in Toronto at the Stella Artois Terrace. Situated on the 3rd floor of Woodbine Racetrack, delight in mouth-watering shared appetizer and raise a toast to the evening. Relish expertly prepared main courses that will tantalize your taste buds. Capture the beauty of sunsets. Indulge in delectable desserts. Secure your reservation today and immerse yourself in the excitement of the races. Enjoy an unparalleled view of the thrilling finish line.
Well, it's a special place, and the food is great, the atmosphere, it's really a nice experience.
Experience the enchantment of Stella Artois Terrace. Open 4 days a week. Undoubtedly the city's premier patio destination.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Attention security seekers. Ready to take control? Introducing Corporate Protection and Investigative Services, your ultimate solution. Retailers tired of losing profits to theft? Our retail loss prevention experts have you covered. Mobile patrol, close body protection, insured door persons, we've got your security needs covered from all angles. Background investigations and civil recovery programs, trust us for thorough solutions. Licensed by the Ministry of Solicitor General, fully insured and bonded. Visit www.corporateprotection.ca or call 1-800-827-1692 for top-notch security and private investigation services. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great folks. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian and local sports. A reminder that the show is available on Spotify, iTunes, Radio Public, Breaker, Google Podcast, Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network, Zingo TV, and Buzz TV Live. Also, check out all the past shows on YouTube. Our great shows are there, some shorts, some clips. You're going to like it. Like and subscribe. It is absolutely free. Thanks once again to Jeff Marek for being on the program. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Do you want to buy or sell a home? Could 31 years of real estate experience help you? Why not speak to an amazing team that loves to overpromise and overdeliver? Aldo has a tremendous team of experts on staff. They are committed to making your next real estate transaction smooth and comfortable. Call 416-GET-ALDO or visit getaldo.com.
Air quality at work matters more than ever, but there's no way to tell if a space is safe to breathe in. If you could actually see what's in the air, would you even come to work? Introducing Air Patrol, making the invisible visible, ensuring workplaces are safer for everyone. Breathe safely.
Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com. Hi there, I'm Joe Tilley. Are you ready for an adventure of a lifetime? Next March, during the enchanting cherry blossom season, join me and my wife for an unforgettable 2-week journey to Japan and South Korea. In Japan, you'll experience the magic of the season as we visit the stunning Osaka Castle against a backdrop of cherry blossoms. Feed the adorable Sikadira at Nara Park, glide through picturesque landscapes on the famed bullet train, cruise on Lake Kawaguchi, and witness the awe-inspiring view of Mount Fuji. Relax in natural hot springs and savor a delightful Fuji dinner banquet while dressing in traditional robes. And of course, we'll dive into Tokyo's cutting-edge technology scene.
In Korea, dress in elegant hanbok attire and step back in time at Cheongdokgung Palace. Wander through Andong Village, a true glimpse into Korea's rich heritage. Delight your taste buds with the flavors of Korean barbecue. We'll even visit the DMZ area to get a glimpse of mysterious North Korea. And guess what? This incredible journey is all yours for just $54.99, all-inclusive, with direct flights from Vancouver, or $58.99 from Toronto. Book now to unlock up to an extra $1,700 in upgrades and savings. Let's make some memories. Let's explore. Let's travel.
Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.